Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host, Jordan Faso, and on today's episode, we're going to do a quick discussion about the MRO inconsistencies. I think everyone's probably pretty fed up with this at the moment. It'll probably be my last rant on this, I promise. But yeah, I think we'll start with that, and then I'll get stuck into some of the actual footy and talk about some finals matchups. Just do a quick power ranking of the matches in week one, my initial thoughts on some of the matches, and then we'll do some season grades as well for the eliminated teams that haven't made the cut for finals this year. So we'll get stuck into that, and then finally we'll finish off with the Secret Star Society inductee for the final round of the season. But yeah, let's get stuck into it. I think let's start with the MRO and tribunal situations. I guess I promise I'll no longer ever comment on the MRO findings, at least not until there's some logic around it. There's currently no logic to be had, so why try and discuss it with some logic? Because the inconsistency with some of these instances is appearing to be quite rife, and I think fans especially have no idea what to expect from case to case. The precedent sort of means nothing, which sort of astounds me, given that the whole process is meant to be somewhat of a simulation of the legal world. But yeah, it's just gotten to a point where I just have no idea what to expect week to week, and incidents that appear very, very much similar, identical in fact, in my opinion. You have no idea what the outcome's going to be for those guys, and we saw it firsthand on the weekend with Liam Jones and Matt Owies as well. So Liam Jones, for those who didn't see, tackled Aaron Cadman, dumped him into the ground. Yeah, the head contact probably wasn't as severe as the Owies one, I guess, but the act was the same in my opinion. He got paid a dangerous tackle in the moment. Matt Owies got paid a free kick, for his tackle for holding the ball. And yet Matt Owies is going to miss a final, and Liam Jones is free to play for acts, in my opinion, that were virtually identical. Like, we can get into the weeds and say, this one was slightly different because his head came into contact with the ground with this much velocity or whatever. Who cares? Both of them didn't result in a concussion. So whatever they are, it's so similar, it's not funny. Let's just punish the outcome, please, at this point. It at least makes it for the fan and for the players and teams, and for the AFL's sake as well. It just makes it somewhat predictable, at least. We're already crying out about the unpredictability, so at least this way we'll know if people actually get concussed. Let's suspend the play that caused that, because clubs can then try and challenge and get them off if they think it was a fair tackle or whatever, and that the concussion was just couldn't have been avoided or whatever. I don't know what the arguments will be, but they can try and get them. Clubs can challenge those situations if they think it's not fair. But as a starting point, I think just suspend anyone that concusses someone, because we know for sure that the tackle was proven to be dangerous, at least. Whereas we've got this real grey area at the moment, and we saw Liam Jones get off with a fine, which is fine. I'm sure Lockie Ash has something to say about that, given that his was pretty similar as well, and he got a week, and he's got a week. But just want to make it clear, I don't think that any of those incidents should have been a week. But I think, especially given the fact that none of them resulted in concussions, so I don't know. At least for the Bulldogs' sake, we get to see them at full strength, and if I had it my way, none of these incidents would have been cited. That's not going to be the case, I understand that, but hey, my name is not Michael Christensen, and I'm not the MRO. Therefore, I don't get a say. But I think all the fans are pretty fed up, and we need to find in the off season, we definitely need to find a standard that can be adhered to in these situations. I think it just makes it the most simple. If someone gets concussed, suspend the player for a week. Let's just leave it at that. And then if it's an egregious sort of situation like the Dan Houston one, then obviously we're gonna have to look at more severe penalties, and that's what happened. So good on the AFL for getting that one pretty right, I guess. Anyway, let's get into some of the finals matchups and the initial thoughts. I think just to declare off the top, I'll do a full preview next week when we have some of the more information around team lineups, injuries, and stuff like that, and who's looking like they're going to play. Obviously, I'll do the pod before the teams are announced, but for now, I'll power rank the finals in terms of the ones that I'm most interested in, and it will come as no surprise that I have the Hawks versus the Bulldogs as my number one seed in the first week of the finals in terms of watchability. Both teams are playing probably the best footy out of anyone right now, and it could could serve as one of the best finals of the year, albeit in week 1. So I think, just quickly, there's a few injury concerns on both sides. The Doggies had a few niggles on the weekend with, Bont, Treloar and Latham Vandermeer as well. So we'll see how they pull up. And obviously Hawthorn will be awaiting the status of Will Day. So few injuries, hurdles for teams to get over. But I think, this is shaping up to be one of the best elimination finals anyway that I can remember in terms of teams that are in form, and a lot of pundits have these two teams going pretty far into the finals based on recent form anyway. So be exciting to see how that one plays out, and as I said, do a bit of a deeper dive into each game next week. Second, we have Sydney versus GWS. A finals derby is always fun. The Battle of the Bridge, and we don't get them too often. Although I think I heard last night on the couch that they said that Sydney are 0-3 against GWS, so maybe they've played more than I realised. But in the finals, always good to have a bit of rivalry in a final, and a lot of stars are on show in this game. So you got both the midfield of Sydney, and then you've got stars all over the ground for GWS as well as in the midfield. So I think that GWS should have a few back that they were missing against the Dogs. So namely, Brent Daniels is the one that'll come back in and have probably a lot of impact, and then Sydney will look to ensure that they have an SCG only fixture in the lead up to the grand final, and hopefully hold home court for the rest of the final series for their sake. Very keen for that one. I think underrated match, and I think that very excited to see the Battle of the Bridge in a finals format again. Third, I've got the Port versus Geelong game. It's so close between these two in the end in terms of the ladder, due to Geelong getting that massive win over West Coast. But so it could have been interesting if it was down in Kardinia Park and Port had to go down there and win again as they did earlier this year with the backs against the wall. But I'm very excited for this game. I think that Port's midfield, just on first glance, might just be too tough for Geelong to handle. Dangerfield is going to have a massive game for Geelong in this one, going back to Adelaide Oval. So I think that, Danger and Jeremy Cameron definitely can win a game for Geelong, but it's going to be a tough one over there. And if Geelong do lose and Hawthorn are lucky enough to get up, that'll be a great second semi-final in the second week of the finals, if that's the case. So sort of hoping for that one, to see that rivalry continue as well. And then lastly, I have put the Brisbane versus Carlton game. I feel like both teams have lost a little bit of steam, definitely more so Carlton, obviously. But even the Lions were very convincing in their last few weeks. That win over Essendon was, they won, but I think that's just what they had to do. They got over the line against them up at the Gabba, and that's what it sort of felt like. So obviously Carlton are sort of stumbling to the finish line a bit with their injuries. They should get a few back, and I think people have likened them to the 2016 Bulldogs, and maybe if you squint there's a chance. But I think that the lack of continuity they've had over the last sort of 5-6 weeks with their team, and the form that they were in even before that. Like, I think I did a podcast and was talking about them and their struggles before they had all these injuries, and they'd lost 3 of their last 4 at that point, and Sam Walsh was playing some pretty average footy as well. So I think that although it is a rematch for last year's prelim, I think that this probably is going to be a Brisbane win comfortably in the end. But it depends how many players Carlton get back, and that's why I sort of wanted to just do a little quick preview of which ones I'm most interested in terms of the finals, and not do a full analysis of the matchups, and they'll hold that for next week. But at this stage, I think Brizzy will comfortably get over the line against Carlton the way they're playing at the moment. So let's get stuck into some of the season grades for the eliminated teams, and just some thoughts on them for their seasons and going into the off-season. And just to note, I will do a more comprehensive review of each team after the season, but it's just sort of a stock take and just see where we're at, and the initial thoughts after the seasons have just come to an end for these teams that failed to make the 8, and obviously not all of them are trying to make finals this year, but we'll grade them accordingly, and for the actual grades, I will be giving actual grades, not just cheerful ones. The rubric is sort of as follows. I've got A's being they've had an outstanding year, B above average, C as expected, D below expectations, and I'll skip E and I'll just have F abject failure. So, bit grim, but did I give it an F out in this situation? Oh, I did. I gave a couple Fs out, so I think we will get to those teams in a minute. I'll just go through them in alphabetical order of who didn't make the finals, and starting with Adelaide. And I've actually given Adelaide a B. I like this to be clear. This is on my expectations of heading into the year. I wasn't super high on them going into this season to begin with. I think where they finished, is about right. Rankin obviously missed a lot of time, and it's probably their best player, which did not help their run at all. He missed it through that sort of middle to back end part of the year with that hammy. But yeah, I think that hurt them a lot, and they maybe could have been in the mix a bit more to make the finals if that hadn't have happened. But they definitely found a few players in the process of this year. Mitch Hinge has really established himself, the same as Josh Worrell and Jake Saligo. So those three guys, they were no guarantees at the start of the year to perform, and they really found some players there. And I think that'll help them out going into next year to have, to have running mates alongside Geordie Dawson and some of the other guys they have that are, sort of more established, like Ben Keys and things like that. But, I think their two pillars up forward are looking great. Obviously, like with Darcy Fogarty and Riley Thilthorpe. But I think that those two, like, you've absolutely got your forward line ready to build around those guys. And I think that they can definitely make some inroads there. Obviously, Ben Keys continued to impress. He had a great season. Just tries as hard as anyone else out there. And, same as Riley O'Brien, as solid as ever. There's rumours that he might be gettable in the off-season. So we'll see what happens with him. But I think he's just a really solid ruckman. And, I don't think that they should be getting rid of him in really... in much of a rush at all. I think he's definitely worth keeping around. Clearly they have a few things to sort out in the off season, especially the Josh Rochelle situation, and that's not really necessarily on them as well. I think Josh just needs to have a good off season and come back in and really prove to everyone why he was so hyped in his first year, and get back to that playing that exciting brand of footy. And hopefully a bit of a bounce back year for Josh Rochelle next year. And I think that they made a statement dropping him the last week, so I think we'll see how he has the whole off season to respond. So we'll see how that goes, and then obviously what happens with Tex Walker. I think that they said in the next few days we'll have an answer on his contract. So I think that the best place for Tex right now is to play that Jack Gunston role from this year. So you're not expected to play every week, and then come in when you've got a few injuries, maybe play. I don't know if Tex can be a sub necessarily, like Gunston has been a couple times, but I think that Tex should be expected to play a fair bit of footy in the SANFL if he is going to stay at Adelaide next year. So I think it just cleans up the forward line a lot for, solidifies the forward line at least for the two pillars that I was talking about before, and gives them the reins a little bit. And hopefully Tex can provide that a bit more of a mentor role than he has in the past. So I think that going into next year, the bar and the competition is pretty high. Obviously, we saw that with the rush to make finals at the end of the year and how close it all was between all the teams. So I think for Adelaide's sake, you can't really just rely on internal growth again. They need to get better players in the door, as well as improving internally. Like, it's not going to, you still need to do that. You just can't rely on that alone, I guess. And then Matthew Nix needs to come back with a game plan that fits his players, and get them going from the start as well, because they had a bit of a slow start to the year. But despite what people say, I think this was a decent year for the Crows, and they solidified a lot of positions, and sort of, in my mind, cleaned up their structure, and they have a few less question marks than they did going into the year for me. And I think it was overall a good learning year for Adelaide, and a few things to clean up, obviously, like I said, with the Rochelle situation. But I think that they can grow from it, and they learned a lot this year from it. So I'll give them a B. Now we'll move on to Collingwood, the next 10 in alphabetical order to miss the finals. A bit shorter on them. Everyone knows sort of what happened with them this year, but I'm going to give them a D. Below expectations for them. I think that they were 1 point from one of those draws that they had from making it. So like it's not the end of the world, I guess. But injuries have a lot to do with their grade this year, and it's definitely below expectation. But I don't expect it to be as bad on next year on the injury front, but the age of their list probably means that they will face a higher injury toll than the majority of other teams. So I think that they need to factor that in the off-season, that they are going to be old, and I think that they would probably not want to have to play Pendleton side bottom again as much as they did this year. So that being said, I think there was still absolutely enough talent out there on a week-to-week basis for them to have made it, and when you consider that they were pretty much healthy for their 0-3 start, winning one of those games would have just put them in the finals. So I think that, you combine that with them having 2 draws where they should have gotten over the line in at least one of those draws. I think it's still been a disappointing year for the reigning Premier, and therefore a bit below expectations for them. I think that I can acknowledge the injuries, but they also were disappointing when they had a chance to cement their spot in the 8 or just get a few more wins under the belt, and they just failed to do that. So I think as a reigning Premier, you just have to find a way, and whether that's on the coach or the players, I don't know where the fall down exactly was this year in those situations, but maybe it was the lack of preparation as well that they had. Much has been talked about of that in the off season. They partied too long, or celebrated the premiership for too long, didn't come back in ripping shape or anything, and obviously had a few off-field issues this year as well with the Craig Kelly situation. So I don't know how much distraction that all puts on the team, but I think as I said, there was enough talent out there for them to not have an 0-3 start and not have 2 draws. That ended up costing them. So I think below expectations for them. Moving on to Essendon, I'm going to give them a C for this year. A lot of people think it's been a failed season for the Bombers, but I guess similar to what I said about Adelaide, that they're a team that I wasn't super high on to begin with. I spoke last week in depth about Essendon, about the lack of top-end talent on their list, which you just saw with the announcement of the All-Australian team. Zach Merritt's the only one that even made the squad. So, the lack of top-end talent really hurts them, so that's why I wasn't really high on them to begin with. This is about where I'd expect them to finish, I guess, given the age profile of their list and the coach and everything. So I think that to be in the 8 for most of the year was, absolutely them playing above their talent level, and their percentage at the time when they were in the top 4 and, sort of falling out of the 8 was sort of a testament to that. I think that they weren't really... didn't necessarily belong where they were on the ladder. I think that they had a lot of close games that they managed to eke out, and that helped them out at the start of the year and made them look a bit better than they probably were. So I think they're probably appropriately placed, given where they finished up on the ladder, and that they can definitely build on this next year under Matt Rose's new list management philosophy, and another year of Brad Scott being the head coach. So we'll see where that takes them next year. But as I said, that's probably about where I expected them to finish. And I think see where they go next year, and whether they do have a bit of an overhaul of the list and try and be a bit more aggressive in their list management. If anyone wants the my lowdown on Essendon last week's podcast, I think I talked about them for about half an hour. So listen into that one if you're an Essendon fan. Move on to Freo. I'm going to give Freo a B because it did come down to the end of the year. I think they learned a lot from themselves. They weren't super consistent over the course of the year. I actually spoke about them as well a couple of weeks ago, last week I think it was, in fact, where they'd win 3 games, lose 1 or 2, and one badly or something like that, and then they weren't competitive against. They were very competitive against most teams. And they flogged a few teams as well. So I think that their offensive game plan really grew this year. They became more confident in it and showed they have both sides of their game. They have the ability to defend and attack. And, the Alex Pearce being out and Josh Tracy being out probably cost them in the end. They probably could have won one of those last 3 games. So they had that little gauntlet run. But I think that was probably the difference between them making the 8 and not. Obviously, they had a chance to beat Port on the weekend and didn't at home, which is, I guess, a little bit of a failure. But, I think that Freo, being the 3rd youngest team in the league, they have a very bright future. And, they played like the 3rd youngest team in the league. This is, I don't know. Everyone expected, I don't know what everyone necessarily expected, but when you are that young and you're knocking on the door of the 8 and you're competing with all the best teams on a week-to-week basis, I think that's a somewhat successful year. Obviously disappointing to miss the finals the way they did, especially when it was in their control, but they're absolutely on track in their trajectory, and I think the Freo fans should be very excited for what's to come. And especially when you consider how contested the 8 was this year, I think the fact that a young team that probably doesn't have the experience of some other teams to not quite make it sort of, makes sense in itself. So, we'll see what happens with Nat 5 in the off-season as well. I think he's contracted for another year. I think it's just 1 year, I think, now. So, I don't think he's going to retire, but yeah, I think he definitely. It might be time to, just shift away from the Fife focus at this point. And I don't know where he necessarily lies in the team at the moment, but he's been a great player. Obviously, one of the two-time Brownlow medalists. So I don't want to call it too early for Nat Fife, but it's not looking great for him in the last few rounds. I thought he struggled quite a bit. So hopefully they can figure that out. But as I said, very bright future for Freo, and I think that this year was still a success, even though they didn't make the finals. They found a few players, like obviously Josh Tracy breaking out, and then Jai Miss went through struggles through the start of the year, and then figured out his goal kicking a little bit more towards the end, and they've got a great midfield, and Sean Darcy obviously was out towards the end of the year too, so I think how that looks when him and Luke Jackson are back together as well probably gives them a win. But every team deals with injuries, so you can't put it all on that. They were still in a lot of those games and had a chance to win them, so I think that they should still be happy with their result this year, I think. Moving on to Gold Coast, I think I'm going to give them a D, so below expectations for me. I think that I thought the addition of Dimmer was meant to catapult them into the finals. I'm being a little bit facetious there, but they weren't even in the race for the finals in the end, which is a bit disappointing given the amount of talent on this list. They've that being said, they have enough talent on the list to be in the 8 at this point in time, and these guys should be ready. They have a Coleman medal threat in Ben King. They have two great key backs in Sam Collins just made the All-Australian squad. Charlie Ballard's a great intercept defender and ball user. They have one of the best rucks in the league, Jared Witts. They have a midfield that should compete with anyone on a nightly basis, and they finished 13th. So I think, a bit disappointing from their perspective. They failed, obviously, they failed miserably away from home. They've won, 2 games in the end away from home, which really derailed their season, and and their confidence too, it would seem. They weren't able to perform in those situations, and it really held them back. And I think that that they still have one of the most talented lists, which is why I think that they've underperformed. But I sort of start to think if they don't get there next year, I think Dimmer's seat will be getting a bit warm. The expectation was that he was going to change the culture and make it a winning one and stuff like that. But obviously when you don't win away from home, that's hard to project and tough to swallow, I think, for any Suns fans out there. Personally don't know any, but give me a shout out if you go for the Suns, because I'd like to meet a Suns fan one day. But as I said, talented list, just didn't get enough out of it this year, and I guess that we'll give him a little bit of a pass given that it was year one of Dimmer's system on the Gold Coast. But you saw it last year with Ross Lyon dragging the Saints to the finals in his first year as coach, first year back as coach of the Saints, with a way less talented team. Obviously, probably a bit more competitive this year to make the finals, but I think that given their record at home was quite good as well, Gold Coast, to not even break even away from home was a bit disappointing and definitely cost them. So a below expectations for the Gold Coast. I'm going to give them a D. Now Melbourne, you guys are getting an F. I think that it's just a failure no matter how you cut this year. The loss of Brayshaw was no doubt an absolute killer for them. They just weren't very good. Their defense has remained pretty strong, but year after year they sort of refuse to deal with their ability to score or the issues they have with their forward structure, and also the delivery of the ball into the forwards is pretty rough at times when you've got Clayton Oliver and Petrarca as well. When they were playing, neither of them are lace out sort of players, and I think that sort of compounds the issues they have up forward, where they don't have a out and out star forward other than maybe Cozzy Pickett, who I don't know whether they look at doing something like Port Adelaide have done in the last few weeks with Willie Rioli and making him the focal point up there a bit more and relying on him and playing off of him. But I think that they need to figure that out going into the off season, and their handling of Petrarca alone probably should give them this grade, to be honest. And I think that this probably is the nail in Simon Goodwood's coaching coffin. The culture and the game plan are completely flawed. So I think that as a club, it's probably time to move on. But I think given their posturing in the last few weeks surrounding the Petrarca trade request, which clearly came from Petrarca. They were in denial the whole time. They have the mouthpiece Gary Lyon talking on Fox Footy about how he won't be traded. They're not going to trade him. They're holding him hostage. Effectively, is what they're doing. I don't really recall a situation where a player requested a trade and the club was this strong in their stance of not trading him. I don't think that really bodes well for you as a club. You're going to bring a disgruntled player back into the locker room into next season. Like, it just seems like a mess of a situation. Why do you want to be the club that's known for not giving players what they want? If the guy wants to leave, why do you want him there anyway? Like, I understand he's an icon of the club, but the dude's won you a premiership. I think that you owe it to him if he feels like you betrayed him, which you did. Like, there's no way, the whole footy world understands, except for Melbourne apparently, that Christian Petrarca was let down by Melbourne quite significantly, and the whole situation was mismanaged. And the rumour was as well that he wasn't happy with how they treated Clayton Oliver last year, which is absolutely correct. They quite blatantly used the media to threaten Clayton Oliver in order to try and fix whatever issues he was going through, which is a ridiculous thing in itself and shows the complete flawed culture that they have down there, using the media again with the Petrarca situation to sort of skew his thinking or strong arm him into staying. It's a very gross culture down there right now, and you even saw it with Max Gawn saying that he can't wait to get away from all of this in a month's time after September's over. So yeah, there's big issues there that I think Melbourne need to sort out, and they should honestly be, they should honestly be like quite. They need to have a full review and a genuine look at themselves, because it's actually just like the handling of people. Like, these guys are humans, and you're treating them like absolute cattle right now, and it's a bit gross to watch from the outside. So I think they need to, take a bit of a look at themselves. It's a bit weird what's going on there at the moment. So. Yeah, not a fan of the D's at all, and that's why I've given them an F of being an abject failure this year. Sorry, Melbourne. North Melbourne, I'm going to give them a D. I think that, I could have given them a C, but I think with the progression of some of their players, you have to give them a D, because like there's still no real signs of a cohesive team here, which is it. And game plan, which is hard to believe given it's year 5 or 6 of a rebuild. I understand Clarko's only been there for 2 years. If you can even really count last year, given the sort of interrupted nature that was that played out to be, but there hasn't been any progression, regardless, in 2 years. I think they've had a few honourable losses in the last part of the year. But for a team that's won 15 games in 5 years, I don't think you can really consider these losses honourable still. Like, there comes a point where you can't accept a losing culture. Winning games is what this is all about, and to win 15 in 5 years is it's hard to stomach for fans, especially. I feel bad for the North Melbourne fans. They won 3 games in 2020. If you had told a North Melbourne fan that in 2024 they're still winning 3 games a year, I think that maybe they wouldn't be shocked given it's North Melbourne, but that's a pretty miserable place to be as a fan. You've had 5 seasons where there's been 0 improvement, so it's obviously not all on Clarko or anything like that. It's on the board, and the failures they've had over that period of time. It's not just one person or the list or whatever, but they've just failed on many fronts, and unfortunately it's led them to this point where they've obviously signed a few more guys, re-signed some guys this year with Cam Zurhaar and Nick Larkey staying, which has been good for them and provides a little bit of stability. But the question going into next year is, will Luke Davies-Uniacke stay? So he's out of contract at the end of next year. He hasn't committed quite yet. I think they're confident he will, but I still think that they need to show some improvement, because another 3-year win, another 3-win year becomes very concerning for them. They need to take that step next year, and the pressure is all on them this off-season. I think that it's probably more. This comment's probably more for the AFL, but I think that what's been shown with Gold Coast and North Melbourne in particular is that giving them priority picks and concession handouts is not necessarily working. You need a culture that is going to help players grow, and I believe that creating a culture like that is a lot more productive and sustainable than a few extra kids coming into the club or giving them a few extra picks that they have to trade like they did, like they have to at the end of this year, I believe. So I think that, maybe instead of just throwing picks at the issue and essentially throwing picks at the issue, I think maybe the AFL should have a bit more of a nuanced focus and maybe look at things like increasing their soft cap and not necessarily that North Melbourne may not be able to afford things like that, but maybe the AFL helps them out in that regard and improves things like their training facilities, more development coaches, things like that, etc. Like that can have an impact on the culture, because I think that's the issue now, is that it's starting to get a bit concerning for them with the lack of progress. Like, obviously they've had some really solid pieces to build around, and guys that have improved quite a bit this year. You feel great about Tristan Jerry, Harry Sheasel, obviously. Nick Larkey, a little bit more of a down year this year, but I think that's more of a symptom of teams really keying in on him and not having that second consistent key forward to help take the pressure off him as well. You've got your Wardlaw and Colby McKercher and Dersma coming through, young talented guys, but I think there's only it doesn't feel like they're all rowing in the same direction for whatever reason, and I think that goes back to what I was talking about, like the lack of successful culture there. So maybe they start to build that off this season, and fresh start next year, and who knows where they can go. They've just seen Hawthorn rocket to the top, so hopefully they can do something similar and start to improve at a faster pace than they have over the last 5 years. And I think that some of the individuals performed really well this year, but just not collectively. So this off season I'm looking at them and hoping that they can pull it together a bit more in terms of performing well as a team. Rather than as individuals, and get all starting to row in the same direction a bit more. Richmond, I'm going to give them an F. I think that I'm being pretty realistic here, that where most people sort of had them finishing in and around the 8, if not just missing out. I think the injuries clearly hit them hard, but for a club to win 2 games for the year is still a failure for mine, especially when there was optimism going into last off season. Like, Uze was very keen to get the job. He thought it was a stable situation he was walking into, and clearly it's been a failure of the year for them. I think it's been a needed failure, and it's sort of forced their hand a little bit in terms of their where they're going to move now as a club. But you look at the team that beats. This is a team that beat Sydney earlier in the year. I think it was round 4 maybe. At the SCG, mind you, with a very similar team to what played in round 24, which lost at the MCG in a farewell game for some of their premiership players. Obviously, Tom Lynch didn't play it in this game, and he played up in Sydney, so maybe he's the difference. But you look at the 2 lineups, and the one that played Gold Coast on the weekend is arguably a better lineup on paper than the one that played Sydney in round 4. So I think that the bottom has fallen out of this club a little bit as the season's gone on, and just on Tom Lynch, he's missed most of the year, but I don't think losing him makes you a 2-win team automatically. This season has sort of resulted in or sort of triggered the Shea Bolton and Dan Rioli requests to get out, or maybe. Really, I don't know if he specifically requested, but where there's smoke, there's fire. He's obviously leaving, and Shea Bolton's trade request too. So I think that maybe those things would have happened regardless. But I think a 2-win season definitely fast tracks those sorts of things, and I absolutely still think it's in the best interest for all parties to move on and get draft capital for those players. But it's hard to imagine. That all of the guys that want to leave from Richmond would have requested to leave if they were a bit more competitive this year, and they've sort of shown some of those players that there's no real reason to stay at the moment. We're just going to tear it down and go through a full rebuild. So I think that's absolutely the play for the Tigers, but that's as a result of the situation that they put themselves into a degree, and that's probably been coming for the last few years. You've had the core of their premiership team with Dusty and Koch and Rewald obviously coming to an end, and Grimes barely being able to play this year and things like that. So I think that you see the core sort of leaving. You bring in guys like Taranto and Hopper, who are good, not great players, and then you have a few injuries. Like, I can see how they got here. I still think it's a bit of a failure on their perspective in what could have been a sort of a nice little farewell tour sort of year for Dusty. But it's on to the next year now for them and next chapter in terms of rebuilding. So I don't think that the fans are going to be too upset either at this year. Obviously would prefer not to have been as bad, but to end up last with the number one pick and then with a few extra picks coming through, I think it's a good year to do so. And by all accounts, it's a great draft, so it's a good year to bottom out for Richmond and get all these picks if they can. So I mean, yeah, I guess it's a little bit serendipitous in that way. I don't think they set out the year trying to be a 2-win team, but that's where they are. So that's why I've labelled them as having an abject failure sort of season. But as I said, not too bad in the end, given the picks they'll get. On to St Kilda. I'm going to give them a D. Just a very St Kilda year, to come home very strong after they were sort of out of calculations. They had their expectations a little bit high, I guess, given the finals appearance in Ross's first year back. But this list, it probably isn't going to win a premiership regardless, as currently constructed. But I think they can get back to the bottom part of the finals equation next year. I think, with a combination of some of the top end talent they have and Ross Lyon, I think that's a possibility. But just in St Kilda's, from their perspective, I think that they're a club that just doesn't have that, that premiership upside or premiership hope. I think that they have this direction where they think they can make the finals, but they're probably not good enough to compete. And, that sort of is exemplified by their list. And, like, their young players are good, but not great. Apart from Nazai Wanganeen-Malira, obviously, and they don't have as many young players as other sort of clubs in the bottom half of the ladder. So I think that's sort of the issue they have, as well as some of their older players are the same. They have a few top liners who are all Australian contending sort of players in Rowan Marshall, who was very stiff not to make the squad at least. Jack Sinclair, obviously, and Callum Wilkie. All three of those guys are all Australian contenders year after year, but they don't have as many top liners as some of the other clubs do. And then when you have those three playing at the peak of their powers, you have Nazai Wanganeen-Malira as the only real young gun. Yeah, I think, and then when you compare that to Essendon, for example, they have more A-graders than Essendon, but less of those sort of average middle of the table sort of players. And ironically, I think Jade Gresham is one of those average sort of guys that would sort of fill the disparity between some of their best and worst players. I think that their worst players, St Kilda, are on par probably with the real bottom teams, but their absolute best players sort of lift them up a bit. So and that's where you end up. You end up in that sort of 12 to 14 range, or 10 to 14 range, and you're not really competing seriously. But you're not the worst of the worst either, where you can sort of top up that good young talent. So they were lucky enough to hit on Nazai Wanganeen-Malira where they were at the time in the draft. I think he was pick 10 or 11. I think he was. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but. Then you take Mateus Philippou, who a lot is hinging on that guy a little bit at this point, because they need someone else to really just give them, a bit of talent upside in the middle, especially. That's where they're obviously struggling year after year, is that one pace midfield. And you have Jack Steele, obviously, is a stalwart of the middle for the Saints, and they've put Stocker in there towards the end of the year, which actually put them on this run as a run with player. But again, him and Jack Steele are probably near carbon copies of each other in terms of their athletic build and things like that. So I think that one pace midfield really needs to change. Not even one pace, just that one. They just have a lot of contested ball winners and not a lot of outside spread users in the centre bounce at least. So something to look for Mateus Philippou to take a step up in that regard, and maybe he's the key to making this team sing a little bit more. Obviously, bringing Max King in should help. I know they went on this run without him towards the end of the year, but I still think that Max King is absolutely essential to what they do. And this, when he's playing well, and the Saints look a lot better, and it helps out Jack Higgins. And some of their small forwards like that a bit more. So I think that, yeah, we'll see how they go this off season. I think they've got a bit of upside to get back up there, and Josh Battle's obviously on the way out, it seems. Hopefully, for their sake, that would trigger an extra first round pick, not a second round pick. But otherwise, it feels like this late season charge for the Saints has, in a way, although they give their fans a little bit to cheer about, I think again it sort of hurt them overall with their pick probably being higher than it needed to be in the draft. Especially when you consider the fact that Battle's on the way out, and they could have improved their draft hand there a little bit as well. And the last team to miss the finals that we're going to talk on are West Coast. So I think I'm going to give West Coast a D. Again, below expectations for me. I can't really put my finger on where they are at as a team. I did a bit of a talk on them a few weeks ago alongside a Richmond discussion as well, but they haven't fully leaned into their rebuild, given they have all this experience on their list still. I think it's definitely time to think about moving on from some of their experienced guys. If they have any value around the league, obviously they should look to trade those guys. But much in the same way that Richmond's hands has been forced, I think that this season is sort of confirmed and reinforced to the club that that they might need to start rethinking about and do a full scale rebuild. I think at this point, maybe they actually chase some of the guys that are leaving Richmond to help accelerate the rebuild in Shea Bolton, if they can get into that discussion, or maybe Jack Graham's probably not the guy they need so much, but given where Richmond are probably looking for draft capital as well in return, it's probably not a deal that either team is going to strike, seeing as they're both wanting the same sort of thing, or should be wanting the same sort of thing in terms of draft capital. But yeah, I think the two timeline sort of idea where they had all these experienced guys and then had a couple drafts where they brought in Elijah Hewitt and Ruben Jimby and obviously Harley Reid as well, and then trying to thread the needle between those guys and having some of the experienced guys that won the premiership with them. I think it clearly hasn't worked, and I think that they just need to appoint a coach as soon as possible to help correct this ship and give them some sort of direction, and give the list management team something to work with as well, see what the coach's vision is for this team, and sort of capitalise on some of the good old players that they still have that they could maybe trade to other teams. They obviously have Harley Reid, which is a great piece to build from, which no one else in the league has a Harley Reid that's 18, and in his first year he just went about it as well as you could hope in a team that was at times non-competitive. I think that they struggled quite a bit, but he showed glimpses of what could be the what he could be at least. So I think that's something to take out, and it's a positive for them, and it gives the fans a lot of hope as well. So I think just on Harley Reid for a minute, I just want to do a quick review of his season. He just in terms of his statistical analysis of who he compares to around the league, and using that comparison function that we talk about on the podcast a bit. I think I ran his stats for the year, and it came out most similar to Jai Simpkin, Elliot Yeo, interestingly, and Jack Graham as well from the Tigers. So I think all in all, you can see those three guys, that you can see how Harley Reid sort of stacks up against them. That contested, loves a bit of physicality, he's a bit bigger sort of player as well. So not bad comparisons there. And I think that it's his first year, so he's not going to be a Jai Simpkin or a Jack Graham in terms of his outlook going forward. But I think that as a first year to hit those sort of standards is a good place to start. And great first year from him. He absolutely passed the eye test first and foremost. He was never really going to be a Nick Dacos or Sheasel from a statistical perspective, where he just racks him up from halfback and gives a team some run off that out of the back line. But the potential impact that Harley Reid has shown to have at clearances, and the ability to hit the scoreboard and take contested marks as a midfielder is is in the truest form of the word. It is generational. You just don't see that come along very often, and as long as West Coast keep him and can build around him, they shouldn't be too far off success, given that in conjunction with the size and sort of pedigree of the club and all the money that they have backing them. So, I didn't expect too much from them this year. It started out a little bit more positive than it ended. Obviously, they looked competitive when Elliot Yeo was flying at the start of the year, and I think that I could have probably given them a C, but I think that the way that they finished the year, where they were just completely non-competitive, just left a bad taste in my mouth. So, but West Coast, you are below expectations for the year. Now that brings me to the end of the season grades for the team. So, I think that, I've been reasonably fair, I think. Let me know if you disagree on the socials or whatever, but, I think that for the most part that this is reasonable for most of these teams. I've been harsh on a few, maybe not as harsh on others, but again, this is based on my expectations, so happy to change them if anyone provides some more valid points as to why it should be another case. But that's where we'll leave it for now, and as I said, we'll dive into those teams a bit more as in the off season, and see after the finals specifically, and do a bit more of a deep dive on them. Now, for the Round 24's Secret Star Society inductee, we have from the Collingwood Football Club, Ed Allen. Now, he has only played 2 games, so I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but I'm going to call it early, and I'll buy the stocks in this kid. So his game against Melbourne in the wet on Friday night is, in what ended up being a dead rubber, was genuinely eye-opening for me in terms of and it should be for Collingwood too. I think that obviously there's not enough of a sample size to read into his stats for the year, so I won't do a statistical comparison for him. But I was absolutely impressed with his game on the weekend. So he started in the middle, centre bounce, started the game, and it was a game where Collingwood were obviously trying to flog Melbourne. They were trying to be as attacking as possible, so I think it's an absolute credit to him, and they obviously rate him very highly to put him in that position to start the game. They had to win by 100 points to give themselves a chance, and they believe that he was one of the pieces to kick that off. So I think good signs for him that they trusted him with that. I think that. Just on him as well, he's 194 centimetres as a midfielder. He showed a bit of burst from stoppage as well. And the thing that caught my eyes was his ability to step through and go against the traffic. He showed that a couple times on the night, as well as being very clean in a game that was, it was a wet weather game. So I think that, being clean in that situation, picking up, getting ground balls and going through traffic was just something that is one of the best skills to have as a midfielder, being clean, namely. So I think that was sort of what caught my eye the most. I think that I won't obviously use the comparison function, but just some names of guys that I think he can sort of build towards as a midfielder is sort of that Will Day, Jordan Dawson, George Hewitt sort of type of player, where they're a bit bigger than your average midfielder. But obviously decent in traffic as well. And I thought the only thing that I would knock him on was his kicking let him down a bit at times. It was a wet weather game, so I'll give him a little bit of leeway there. But I think that overall it's his second game, and for a team with limited top end young talent other than Nick Dacos, it's definitely a good find for them. Another guy that's in the mix come next year, and I think that for me as well, a lot of talk has been about. A lot of hype before the season was about Finn McRae from a Collingwood perspective, but come into next season, I think all the hype will be about this kid, and they've definitely found one here, I reckon. And I know it's only been 2 games, but I'd be very excited if I was a Pie supporter. Alrighty guys, that's it for this week. As I said, I'll be back next week with full breakdown and previews of the finals. We'll dive into that, how I think the teams will win, what matchups to look out for, and things like that. And we'll get stuck in, and it's the best time of year. So enjoy, guys, and enjoy the week off.